The news broke like a thunderclap, reverberating across the country in an instant. On a chilly January morning in 2026, as frost clung to windows and breath hung in the air, Americans awoke to a world that felt suddenly unfamiliar. Every screen in America, from living rooms to bustling cafes, flashed the same urgent message: Supreme Court strikes down Trump tariffs. The words scrolled relentlessly, impossible to ignore. Television anchors interrupted regular programming, their faces tense and voices trembling, scrambling to explain a decision that would reshape the American economy for years to come. Newsrooms buzzed with frantic activity, phones rang off the hook, experts patched in from around the globe, all echoing the same sentiment. This is unprecedented. The sense of urgency was palpable. The Supreme Court had delivered a landmark ruling, directly challenging years of trade policy under President Trump and overturning a cornerstone of his economic legacy. The foundation of America's global trade was suddenly in question. Decades of agreements, negotiations, and rivalries seemed to hang in the balance. On the New York Stock Exchange, confusion erupted into chaos. Traders shouted, phones rang, and markets swung wildly as uncertainty gripped Wall Street. Some stocks soared on the hope of new opportunities, while others plummeted in fear of the unknown, underscoring the enormous economic stakes at play. This wasn't just politics. It was about money in people's pockets, jobs on the line, and the price of everything from steel to soybeans. The ripple effects would touch every corner of the country. The decision pulled a critical thread from the fabric of the global economy, and no one knew what would unravel next. International markets braced for aftershocks. Across the country, reactions were immediate and deeply personal. In homes, offices, and coffee shops, people debated what the future might hold. For some, it was vindication, a long-awaited correction, a chance for new beginnings and fairer trade. For others, it felt like a betrayal, a sudden blow that threatened their livelihoods and the stability they had worked so hard to build. Political lines were drawn instantly, with protests erupting in city squares and heated debates flaring in Congress. Statements from the White House and Congress flooded the airwaves, each side framing the ruling as either a victory for justice or a dangerous overreach. The ruling wasn't just about tariffs, it was about power, about who truly holds the reins of America's economic destiny. Who decides the future of American prosperity? Is it the president, Congress, or the highest court in the land? On this historic day, the Supreme Court gave its powerful, shocking answer, sending shockwaves through every level of government and society. The nation held its breath, waiting to see what would come next. In that moment, time seemed to stand still. The story was moving at lightning speed, with headlines changing by the minute and everyone scrambling to keep up with the latest developments. The air was thick with uncertainty. A fundamental shift had just occurred, and the path forward was anything but clear. America and the world waited for the next chapter to unfold. What is a tariff? Simply put, it's a tax on imported goods. Tariffs make foreign products more expensive, aiming to protect local industries. The Constitution gives Congress the power to set these taxes and regulate trade. Over time, Congress delegated some authority to the president, especially for emergencies or unfair trade practices. This created a gray area. How much power should the president really have? The legal battle today centered on whether the president overstepped that authority. Was national security a valid reason for sweeping tariffs, or did the executive branch seize a power meant for Congress? The Supreme Court's decision was about more than steel or aluminum. It was about the balance of power in government. To truly understand the significance of today's Supreme Court ruling, we need to look back at the events that set everything in motion. Our story begins in 2018, a year that marked a dramatic turning point in global trade relations. That year, the Trump administration, invoking national security concerns, imposed steep tariffs on imported steel and aluminum. These measures were justified as necessary to protect industries considered vital to America's defense and economic strength. The goal was clear: shield American manufacturers and ensure the country's ability to produce essential materials for its military and infrastructure. But the tariffs didn't stop there. They quickly expanded, with the administration targeting China for what it called unfair trade practices, igniting a fierce US-China trade war that would dominate headlines. In response, China retaliated by slapping tariffs on a range of American goods, hitting US agriculture especially hard. Farmers suddenly found their crops, like soybeans, facing new barriers overseas. the conflict didn't stay between the US and China. It soon spread to American allies, including Canada and the European Union, straining long-standing relationships and prompting even more retaliatory tariffs from all sides. All of this was part of the administration's America First agenda, a bold effort to rebalance global trade, protect US jobs, and revive domestic manufacturing. President Trump even dubbed himself a tariff man, firmly believing that these new taxes on imports would ultimately strengthen the American economy and restore its competitive edge. This marked a bold and disruptive departure from decades of US policy that had favored free trade and open markets, sending shockwaves through the global economic system. Around the world, governments, businesses, and ordinary people watched anxiously as the United States upended long-standing international trade norms, creating uncertainty and volatility in global markets. With tensions rising and the stakes higher than ever, the stage was set for a dramatic legal and economic showdown, one that would shape the future of global trade for years to come. The tariffs split the nation. Supporters saw them as overdue protection for American workers and a revival of manufacturing. Steelworkers cheered, hoping for more jobs and a stronger industrial base. They believed tariffs would finally level the playing field against unfair foreign competition. Critics, however, warned of higher costs for businesses and consumers. Manufacturers faced soaring prices for materials, passing costs to customers or cutting jobs. Farmers suffered as China stopped buying American soybeans, pushing many to the brink. Economists warned trade wars rarely end well. The tariffs disrupted supply chains, alienated allies, and triggered economic backlash. The nation was divided, hope for some, hardship for others. The tariff fight was also a constitutional struggle. Who controls trade policy? The Constitution gives Congress that power, but over time, it delegated some authority to the president. The Trump administration used national security as justification, sparking fierce debate. Critics argued this was executive overreach, using security as a pretext for protectionism. Congress tried to reclaim its authority, proposing bills to limit presidential power, but political gridlock stalled progress. The conflict moved to the courts, raising questions about the limits of executive power. The issue was bigger than trade. It was about checks and balances in American democracy. With political branches deadlocked, the Supreme Court was left to decide. The tariffs' impact was uneven. Some U.S. steel and aluminum producers thrived, reopening plants and hiring workers, but most businesses use, not make, steel, facing higher costs and passing them to consumers. Prices of everyday goods crept up, fueling inflation concerns. Farmers were hit hardest, losing export markets to retaliatory tariffs. Federal aid tried to soften the blow, but couldn't replace lost markets. The disruption rippled through supply chains, slowing ports and trucking companies. Businesses delayed investments, uncertain about the future. The tariffs, meant to strengthen America, created widespread anxiety. The economic friction was felt in every corner of the country. Legal challenges to the tariffs began as a wave of lawsuits from businesses and importers. They argued the president exceeded his authority and that the law itself was unconstitutional. Early court rulings favored the government, deferring to presidential discretion on national security. But as appeals progressed, some judges questioned the limits of executive power. A key appeals court ruling signaled the judiciary might set boundaries on presidential authority. Conflicting decisions in different courts created a circuit split. The Supreme Court stepped in to resolve the issue once and for all. After years of litigation and billions in tariffs, the stage was set for a historic decision. The fate of the tariffs and the future of presidential power hung in the balance. The nation awaited the court's ruling. The Supreme Court hearing was electric. Lawyers, industry leaders, and lawmakers packed the courtroom. The justices probed the limits of presidential power and Congress's role in trade. The challengers argued Congress can't hand over its core taxing power without clear limits. The government insisted the president's actions were legal and tied to national defense. Justices pressed both sides. Where is the line between security and economics? Could any import be declared a threat? The debate was classic. Executive flexibility versus legislative control. As arguments ended, no one knew how the court would rule. The nation braced for a decision that would shape the future. After months of anticipation and heated debate, the wait finally ended. The Supreme Court struck down the controversial tariffs in a landmark 6-3 decision that sent shockwaves through Washington and beyond. The majority opinion, written with clarity and conviction, strongly defended the principle of separation of powers, ruling that the law in question gave the president far too much unchecked authority over trade policy, undermining the constitutional balance. Importantly, the court did not ban all national security tariffs outright. Instead, it emphasized that Congress must set clear, specific limits and guidelines, ensuring that future presidents cannot act unilaterally without legislative oversight. The immediate effect was dramatic. Tariffs on steel, aluminum, and a wide range of Chinese imports were invalidated, sending ripples through global supply chains and affecting industries across the nation. Businesses across America rejoiced at the news, with many celebrating newfound opportunities. Stock markets surged in response, and leading economists predicted that the decision would help ease inflationary pressures and lower costs for consumers. The decision dealt a significant blow to the America First doctrine, which had prioritized protectionist policies and marked a major victory for free trade advocates who had long argued for open markets and international cooperation. With this ruling, power over trade policy shifted decisively back to Congress, forcing lawmakers to engage in open debate and cast votes on future tariffs, making the process more transparent and accountable to the public. The ruling stands as a historic check on presidential power, reminding the nation that no single branch can dominate the others, especially in matters as vital as trade. It reaffirmed Congress's central and constitutional role in shaping commerce and taxation, ensuring that the people's representatives have the final say. The economic and political fallout from this decision will take time to fully unfold as industries, workers, and policymakers adjust to the new landscape. But one thing is clear: the Supreme Court has redrawn the lines of power in Washington, setting a new standard for how trade policy is made and who holds the authority. This precedent will not only shape trade policy, but also influence the balance of power between the branches of government for generations to come, echoing through future legal and political battles. Through it all, the Constitution's enduring strength and resilience shine through, guiding the nation even in turbulent and uncertain times, and reminding us of the enduring principles at the heart of American democracy.